Hello, I'm David Zahn of OK, Now What? And I'm glad you're joining me for this live stream. But as we often ask at the beginning of these, if you're viewing this live, put that down in the comments. If you are unable to make the live session, but are viewing this as a recording, additionally, put that in the comments. I love to know when people are accessing the content, and always invite your comments, your thoughts, your ideas for future live streams so that we can be sure that we're meeting your needs. Today's live stream is focused on something that I call learning drives business results. And maybe if there were to be a subcontext to this, it's inviting us to think like a CEO. If you use the analogy of your own home and budgeting, you probably make decisions on what to purchase, what to acquire, based on the value that you'll receive, the reduction in risk that purchase decision will end poorly. So we invite you to think about learning activities with a similar metric, a similar approach to understanding whether or not it makes sense for us to invest in a particular learning activity. But let's deal with some reality now. And I'll be quoting from a study done by Brandon Hall Group, which just this past year released results of a research study that they had conducted through 2023. And it looked at some of the self-perceptions of learning and development leaders. And what they found is a little startling. And I'll be sharing some of those results with you. But broadly speaking, we want to be sure that learning and development leaders are identified as struggling with how to tie their activities to business results. There's a scramble to try to get their arms around, are their activities truly adding value, or are their activities merely chasing the wind and not really doing anything to move the needle in terms of business results or performance? At the same time that struggle is occurring, we're also seeing that business leaders have lost a lot of the patience they may have once had for training activities that don't truly contribute to the outcomes or business results being pursued. So surely there's always been a sense that somewhat intuitively we believe, or we think that, well, it's good to do training and it's good to upskill people. And of course, by the very nature of that, it's a positive. But unless we can truly prove it and point to results, a before and after, a gap analysis that shows that it has been reduced between current state and ideal state, then business leaders are far less likely to want to engage or pay for different training activities. So while it's been just presumed over the years that training for training's sake is good and it must be adding value, if we really can't point to it quantitatively with evidence, it becomes much more difficult for us to staff, for us to get budgeted, and for us to have the cooperation of business leaders. So I wanted to share a series of results that this study came up with. So I'll take myself off the screen now and go to the PowerPoint. So as you can see here, if we ask ourselves just how good are we at training, the first thing that comes to mind is that under half, 40% claim to be proficient or better at identifying the outcomes that will be achieved prior to delivery, which means 60%. And if you give me a little bit of license, that's very close to 2/3 of the trainings that are occurring are being done without a direct link to a business outcome. So if you look at the far right with proficient and highly proficient, that row, those two rows, you'll see it only amounts to 40%. Further, 40% specifically target learning at a proficient or better level. So they're not truly even attempting to link the learning activities to a particular skill set. Really incredible that, again, 60% are not doing that. Further, less than a quarter even have a way, a method, a process for collecting data. They're just going out there doing training, and no one has thought to figure out, are we really moving the needle? Are we doing anything that's a positive here? Are we doing something that helps the business achieve its goals and objectives? So, what exactly stands in the way of us being able to be better stewards of the company's resources, that, of course, being the finances that it takes to conduct training, whether it's our salaries, the salaries of the people that we're training, because time devoted to training is very often time that's out of the scope of the job currently that the trainee has been hired to do. So let's look at some of those things. Well, again, 40% claim not to have budget or staff in order to do the work necessary to prove that their training is effective. And 30% allege that they don't even have the right resources or tools. They don't have the technology to support the analysis. So they're left to just simply, it feels like, or we think that, or perhaps we believe we are helping, but they really can't go too much further than that. Also, only 2/3 even use a learning management system. And if you're not familiar with what a learning management system is, it's a portal that is used to track trainee performance, host online learnings, or schedule in-class, in-person facilitations. It can track specific areas that need further remedial instruction. If you see that people are getting a particular quiz question wrong, you can provide some further tutorial on that point. You can identify whether students in one job classification or one geography tend to outperform the others, or on the other side of that, underperform the others, etc. And of course, there are then other additional tools that often are brought to bear that can do an even deeper dive into the analysis of performance. And nearly half of those that were part of this research are still reliant on simply Excel spreadsheets and tick marks to measure learning impact. So obviously, there's a long way to go for us to get that level of granularity needed for us to do a much better job at analyzing our impact as trainers, instructional designers, or even consultants being brought into companies to provide some kind of employee development. So the consequences are absolutely blindingly obvious. Only about half even claim to be aligned with business goals. And keeping in mind, these were executives in learning and development. So that's their self perception. I can't promise this, but I would almost be more inclined to think that if we asked business leaders if they agreed, they probably would say that number is high and fewer than the so called self claiming 50% are truly aligned with business goals. I think that many of the respondents in this particular research probably inflated their importance, which is a somewhat natural human tendency. But it just goes to show, even with that perceived inflation, we're still only at roughly 50% that even claim to be aligned or very aligned. So that really is something that is of importance to recognize, that we need to do a much better job of aligning with the business goals of our business executives. So if we dig a little bit more deeply into this research, it was also discovered that a quarter of respondents report that learning measurement is not even a priority for their leaders, and that the organization does not always deliver learning with a very direct link to performance outcomes. And they'll claim that they can't even access the metrics to prove or disprove that. Really disconcerting to think about that a quarter of the respondents in this survey, in this research, feel that learning measurement is really not even of consequence, that it's not important enough to put effort against it. Also, a quarter admit they don't even know how to link learning to organizational outcomes. So they haven't gone across the bridge to say what we are doing is a positive to what the organization is attempting to accomplish. Frankly, it's a little scary to me that these are people who are pulling down a salary or requiring other employees to participate in an activity that doesn't really seem to have a purpose in some instances. It's almost as if you're planning to go on a vacation, but you haven't packed, you haven't checked that the fuel is in the vehicle, you don't have a destination, you don't even know who you're bringing along with you. It's a terrible way, in my estimation, to do business. But it's also a great opportunity for you to be able to say, not only can you provide training, not only can you assist in employee performance development, but you also know how to assess, how to determine accountability, how to measure. That's the treasure here. You have that skill. You've been doing that for so many years, and you can bring that to business. And the truth is that even those that claim or do measure impact, often they don't have a standard approach. If you are able to demonstrate that you do have a process, you do know how to assess, you do know how to evaluate, you put yourself far ahead of others who simply are going through the motions. Oh, I have a facilitation today. Okay, pull out the leader's guide and I'll read the various script from that without giving thought to, am I really helping the business achieve its goals? Am I doing anything to help the business move forward? These are really key, essential things that we need to be focused on as trainers. So I'd like to go back to a slide now and show you a very commonly used approach to evaluating training, and I'll walk you through exactly how to interpret it. This is referred to as the Kirkpatrick evaluative matrix. And what this includes is, if you start at the very bottom level, This is the most fundamental or basic way for us to measure training. And what it does is it asks, did your learner like the course? And that's sometimes referred to as a smile sheet. At the end of a training, they hand out a survey form and they say, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I dislike it, 5 being I loved it, how would you score this course? Now, my opinion here is it's all well and good if a course is liked, but is that really measuring what's important? Don't we want to measure the impact of behavior, performance, business results? So we go to the next level, which is this yellowish gold color, and we ask, can learners score on a test or on some kind of an assessment? What this does is it really tests knowledge. We still likely haven't had performance or behavior. So then we look at, do you assess, do you evaluate how knowledge and skills are being applied by learners on the job? Now at least we're getting to, are the learners able to make the transfer of what they learned in the training, be it in the classroom or online? Are they now able to recognize what actions to take? Do they take those actions? Do they know what triggers the action should be performed? Those kinds of questions. But yet, we still don't know, have we in any way impacted the business? So we go to that next level, which is kind of this deep blue color, and we say, what percentage of the learning content offered in your organization is measured for the impact it has on either the individual or organizational performance? And you can see as we went up this triangular assessment tool for training evaluation, nearly 3/4 simply do the how a learner liked the course or a learning event, the so-called smile sheet. And only as we go to the very top, a little less than 1/3 even make the attempt to determine the impact on the individual or the organization's performance. A little frightening, frankly. If I was a business leader and this were put in front of me, I would be looking long and hard as to whether or not I want to fund training efforts. So here are some critical questions that I think are important for us to ask. The first one being, what are the business metrics we are currently pursuing beyond simply completion rates and those so-called smile sheets? So, it's one thing for us to look at the completion rates. How many people sat through the training? What was the attendance? How many people went through the online module from start to finish? That doesn't really tell you anything about their behavior or even, frankly, about their knowledge. And then to have them grade whether it's worthy of a 5 on a 5-point scale in terms of did you like the training, it smacks to me of that so-called edutainment, sort of the Sesame Street-izing of training, in where we try to engage people by merely entertaining them so that they have a good time. I'm not going to discount the importance of engaging participants, but to make that our focus exclusively, or even as a higher priority than measuring performance, I think is really a big mistake. Then we can look at, as a critical question, what steps do we need to take to improve our measuring of learning? What are the process steps we need? What are the resources and tools as the next bullet point down, so that we can look at how can we do a better job? Where are the gaps in our ability as trainers to impact the organization? And then we look at how we can impact, rather, how we can integrate analytics of learning performance to gain the respect from our business leaders, that we can demonstrate we deserve a seat at the table because we are offering value, and that we should be positioned to collaborate and partner with leaders as it relates to, as it concerns the results, the business performance that the organization is pursuing. For far too long, training has been seen as something that we just assume has value. On the face of it, who could deny that training is a good thing? But if we're really not prepared to demonstrate it using the language of business, which means effectiveness, efficiency, revenue, profit, safety, things that truly drive the performance of a business, then it won't be too long before we are shut out of our ability to influence the direction of the businesses that we are working for or working with. So as I conclude this live stream, I want to remind you, if you'd like to contact me, you can do so at davidzahn@oknowwhat.biz. And if you'd like to schedule a session to dive more deeply into how you can impact the businesses you either currently work for or intend to work for, you can certainly schedule time on the calendar at oknowwhat.biz/calendar. Certainly hope this has been an informative live stream and very much look forward to working with you to upgrade and enhance your training skills. Thanks for your participation.